Podcaster made a dumb joke. It was a pretty dumb joke. So people who don't like him complained to his host, and he got dropped, thus ending a series of podcasts he had produced in the periphery to his main show, which is called Sword and Scale. It's actually this is an interesting story, because I have to wonder if the reason Sword and Scale was targeted so heavily is because of their overt support for Sargon of Akkad, Jordan Peterson, and Dave Rubin. After the Patreon debacle, Sword and Scale, being one of the top Patreon accounts, said they would join Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson's platform when it was ready. That absolutely is going to put them in the crosshairs of the regressive left and the far left. Well, look, this dude from Sword and Scale made a dumb joke. It was International Women's Day, and he posted a meme on his Instagram that was offensive. It used, dumb C word. And in my opinion, it was rather tasteless. I didn't think it was funny, but should someone be stripped of their income and have their host drop them? No, pencils have erasers, man. I think a stern warning, but you know what? I gotta say this. I don't know about the internal relationship between him and the company. And I wanna point out too, so he got dropped. So here's the story. Wondery drops Sword and Scale podcast after host Mike Boudette's dumb C-word comments. Boudette, I think that's how you pronounce it, had posted a degrading comment on his Instagram page on International Women's Day. So here's the thing. I don't necessarily blame Wondery for dropping them, because they're terrified of the regressive left, the same as everyone is. The world we are living in right now is this social credit system. You basically have a snitch on your neighbor's mentality. When I was younger, somebody asked me if I wanted to join a program that paid decently to walk around your neighborhood writing down license plates. And I said, you want me to snitch on my neighbors? And they said, no, you just write down license plates. And I'm like, you realize why they want you to do that? They're creating a database so they can sell it to law enforcement and repo and debt collectors. I'm not gonna go snitch on my neighbors. That's ridiculous. And this person backed away and then realized what they were doing was stupid. This is the world we live in, though. It's a world where a guy who has one of the top podcasts in the world made a stupid joke. It is a stupid joke. Listen, Count Dankula's joke was funny. If you're not familiar, he's the guy who made his dog do the Nazi pug thing. That was legitimately funny. I know a lot of people didn't like it, the regressive left and of a particular faction, but comedy clubs show that video. It went viral. It had 2+ million views. That's how they found out about it. This joke made by Mike is not funny. So there is a difference. However, I don't think if someone says one thing stupid, you destroy their livelihood and shut them down like that. The problem is Wondery, which is their host, and I believe they provide the ads for the various shows produced by Sword and Scale. They're being hounded by regressives who are like, he's offensive, take him down. They're tweeting things like, what will it take for you to ban him? And you know what they're worried about? They're a hosting company. They have to have partnerships with advertisers. Advertisers are scared. These people are snitch on your neighbors people. They want to exert authority and power. These are people who are bullies or who were bullied, and they want to push you around. Let me point something out. Even when I make videos critical of YouTube and Twitter, I will very rarely, if ever, directly criticize the individuals. I have criticized Jack Dorsey directly, but I've also praised him following the Joe Rogan experience because he was willing to have this discussion. I've in the past called him duplicitous, but I think that was unfair at this point. One of the reasons I typically avoid calling out people by name is that the idea is the problem, the action is the problem, the individual, while yes, depending on the individual can be a problem too, I don't think it's worth pointing to specific people unless they are of particular prominence. In this instance, Mike Boudette of Sword and Scale, he's just the guy who runs a podcast. He's not the guy who runs Twitter. He is not overtly powerful. This is what I find worrying. You'll see that I'm very critical of Ocasio-Cortez, especially on this channel. I am relatively critical of Trump. I rarely make direct videos about Trump because the media does that 99.9% of the time, but I actually do squeeze in direct criticisms of the president very frequently. The point is, he's the president. Ocasio-Cortez, probably the most prominent Democrat. Jack Dorsey, unelected, unaccountable, extremely wealthy, running a platform controlling a large portion of public discourse. Pointing to these people and their actions, in my opinion, makes sense. You know what they do? They call it on the left punching up. But what about Sword and Scale? It was an entertainment podcast with no control over anyone. The podcast was not overtly political. It talked about true crime, and the dude made a bad joke. Their reaction? Let's burn it to the ground. We are living in this world where everyone is in a Mexican standoff because some people just want to go for the throat and exert their authority and force others to do what they want. And this is another reason why I'll be critical of Ocasio-Cortez and Dorsey, and to a certain extent Trump as well, because you have people who want power. They want power, they use power, they act like they're the ones who deserve it. In the instance of Jack Dorsey, he seems like he wants to be a philosopher king, to maximize good, not realizing that that's not possible. You can't. You don't know what everyone needs. You're not smart enough. Ocasio-Cortez is an arrogant narcissist. She says things like, you're just yelling from the cheap seats and I'm in charge. And Trump seems to, Trump seems to be narcissistic, bloviating, and he takes everything very personally. And there's I try to avoid getting into, look, I'm going on a rant about people now, right? In my opinion, I think one of the challenges and one of the criticisms I have as Trump is actually not just that he can be aggressive and snarky and snide and rude, just like the other people, but it's that he is the president, so he is worthy of this scrutiny. And foreign interference, intervention, calls, now we're seeing people call for intervention in Venezuela. We're going off on a tangent. I got to pull it back. Let's see exactly what happened. So he posted this joke. I don't understand dumb C's. Maybe I should take one apart to see how it works. On Friday, so Wondery tweeted, we have decided to part ways with Mike Boudet and Sword and Scale. On Friday, which is also International Women's Day, Boudet wrote in a now deleted post on Instagram, I don't understand dumb C's. Maybe I should take one apart to see how it works. Wondery had declined to comment when the Wrap asked about the post on Friday and did not immediately respond to a request for confirmation that Friday's post was the reason for cutting ties with him and his podcast. He did post a SoundCloud file where he said, right now as it stands, this is the end. We'll keep putting out plus episodes on Patreon until we move to our own platform and then continue putting out episodes behind that paywall. Basically, my understanding is that Sword and Scale produced a periphery of other shows, and he had a staff, and they had advertisers. And because of that, they all basically shut down except for the primary show, which will still exist on Patreon. Sword and Scale on Patreon has something like 14,000 patrons and is making a lot of money. So it's very likely he can continue at least this one show. But here's an interesting thing. This guy, Aaron Mahnke, I don't know who he is, he does the Lore podcast, I guess. I've never been too familiar with him. I know I saw Lore on Amazon, and they did like a show about it. Sword and Scale announced that they are coming to an end thanks to A. Mahnke and Rabia Squared. Plus episodes will still be regularly released at Patreon Sword and Scale. Here's the full story, and then he published a SoundCloud file where he said, the mob will shut you down for making bad jokes, for saying bad things because they want to censor you. Aaron Mahnke said, first, a podcast as popular as his should never have to cease production. He has all the tools he needs to run it independently, not my fault. Second, his behavior on social media did this, not the complaints from me and others. Well, hold on. His behavior did this, not the complaints. Well, your complaints precipitated the removal of his show, of his sponsors, of his host, right? While I can certainly condemn the dumb joke of Sword and Scale, you want to know what I do when I see dumb jokes? You ready for this? Just close your eyes. I don't get it. It's people, Count Dankula made this point. There are people who are not content with simply saying, I don't want to be involved. They want to shut you down. And that's why I want to go back to the point about the people I'm willing to point the finger at. You don't see me making videos about Ted Cruz and Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, or moderate Republicans and Democrats, because they do what they've always done. I don't care. Ocasio-Cortez comes off as someone who has no idea what she's talking about, and it reflects poorly on the left. And she repeatedly talks about how she's better than, like, I'm the boss, I'm in charge. And then, yes, you have Trump doing similar things. The issue ultimately is individuals who want to hurt other people because they want power. These are the people I don't like. I do not like individuals who have power and wield it indiscriminately. And this is not everybody who is in power. Simply because you have power doesn't mean you're a bad person. But there are some people who are bad people. Sword and Scale was an entertainment show that had almost no bearing on how anyone else lives their lives. And if you don't like it, and you don't like what he's saying, you can mute, block, and walk away. Interestingly enough, This dude, Aaron Mahnke, has me blocked on Twitter. No idea who he is, never tweeted about him. In fact, if I was ever going to tweet about this guy, it would probably be something like, I've seen that Lore podcast show like once or twice, and the couple episodes I watched, I liked. But I admittedly, I didn't know a lot about who he was. I've seen the Lore podcast. I actually thought it was pretty good. And then when I checked out who he was, I was like, oh, he's the guy who did that, right? So he has me blocked. No idea why. But sure, fine. I've blocked some people too. I've blocked people I think are bad actors who want to take my quotes and my statements out of context to lie about me. And so I blocked them. But here we have, this is just another example of, I mean, it's weird to me how in the culture war, actually I think this is a good example of what the culture war might be. Letting people do their thing so long as they don't screw with you versus people who want to challenge authority. I feel like that's a good aspect. Now, admittedly, the culture war is a bunch of different bubbles with overlaps. It's ultimately authoritarian versus libertarian. And I do think there are people on one side that will defend certain authoritarian practices. I see a lot of people on the Donald saying things like we need intervention in Venezuela, and I am not for that by no means. But then you'll also see the Donald challenging the left. So you have to keep in mind the different tribes in the culture war aren't always completely aligned with each other, but there are overarching aspects that they do align with, like freedom and liberty. If you are for freedom and liberty, then you would be opposed to what happened with Sword and Scale, with activists targeting a platform to remove a top podcast. Well, I'll leave it there. Apparently, Mike has said offensive things in the past, but again, you know, like I believe it was Tyler, the Creator, he said, how is cyberbullying real? Just close your eyes. Seriously, you want to know what I do to deal with all the harassment I get? I just don't look at it. I check it from time to time because sometimes there's legit criticisms. But when people are just berating me with lies and smears, I just ignore it. Plain and simple. I wish other people could do the same. I'll leave it there. Stick around. I got more videos coming up starting. I got another video on my main channel at 4 p.m., which is with Dave Rubin addressing criticism from the haters who want to shut him down. And then more videos at 6 p.m. on this channel. I'll see you then.